recapping games 3 and 4 of the NBA Finals, and touching on Hustle, the new basketball movie on Netflix featuring Adam Sandler. Today on the Michael Welch Podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings. I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty.
So game 3 of the NBA Finals in Boston started out with a hot Boston lead, and then continued from there as they were kind of able to keep the Warriors at an arm's distance for most of the night. The Warriors were able to take a brief lead in the third quarter, but the Celtics never really seemed to let their foot off the gas once we entered the fourth quarter, and pretty comfortably won this basketball game. Jaylen Brown accounted for 6 of the 20 buckets made in the first quarter as he was off to a hot start early. Boston was shooting over 50% in the first quarter. The Warriors just over 40%. They were 2 for 10 from 3, and it was 33-22 after the first. Brown had 17 points and 5 boards. Horford looked much better with 7. Tatum's shoulder was still hurting him throughout this entire game. He has to have something wrong with that, as I stated previously, and you could see watching the games. Damage has to be done further in that shoulder, I'm certain. He had 3 points in the first and started to heat up later in the game as well, as both Tatum and Brown finished with a decent line. Peyton Pritchard saw early time in the first quarter after being held out into the third quarter in Game 2 and was productive immediately. Curry only had 7 in the first. Wiggins and Looney each had 4. Thompson struggled early to start the first, but had 10 straight for the Warriors at one point from the end of the first quarter, bridging into the second. And the Warriors have to feel pretty upset as both Curry and Clay ended up having a productive game. And Draymond struggled horribly before following out of the game. And he was instigating the entire time as well. He was in a tangle with Green after the Game 3 and Game 3 here after the Game 2 scuffle. A couple minutes into the second quarter, and he's egging on Grant Williams, who he, of course, ran over earlier in this series. Tatum was able to kind of get fired up and have 8 straight points at one point, coming back off the bench in the second quarter to kind of get himself started. Now, the lead was 67-56 at half, as the Celtics lead hovered right around double digits for the majority of the game. Third quarter had been Warriors' time for the first 2 games, and it was again here. Curry hit a couple of threes early, but was hit with his 4th foul when he was reaching in on Marcus Smart, shooting a 3-ball on his next possession. And then the Celtics followed that up by forcing a turnover on Draymond Green the next time down, and the Celtics hurried up and inbounded the ball and got an open bucket for Brown to score 5 straight Celtics points to kind of lessen the blow of those threes. So it was just more Warriors mistakes. Now, they cleaned that up a little bit later down the line. I shouldn't say cleaned it up. They had an excellent series later on down the line. The Warriors got a 7-point play, which is something I've never seen personally. Steph Curry was pulling up for a 3 in transition. His body was carrying forward. He hit the 3-pointer, and Al Horford kind of slid under his feet into Curry's landing space, and he was called for a flagrant 1. So he got a free throw, made the free throw, and they get the possession back, the ball. And Porter Jr. was able to hit a 3-pointer. So a 3-pointer for Curry. He got a free throw, and then Porter Jr. got a 3 when they got the possession back. So the Celtics had, I think, right around a double-digit lead still at that point. And after a 7-point possession, by the time they got the ball back again, I believe it was a 2-point game in the third quarter. And that was part of a 12-0 run. There was a bucket the Warriors made before that, and Steph Curry made a 3 after that, the following possession, after they made a defensive stop on the Celtics to turn that 7-point stretch into a 12-0 run for the Warriors. Golden State did end up grabbing an 88-83 lead, and that quickly swung back the other direction. Curry had 15 points in the third quarter, but the Celtics were able to build that lead back up again and take it into the fourth quarter, and the Warriors' offense just promptly fell apart. I believe the Score posted a stat that Steph Curry only has 6 points in the fourth quarters through 3 games of the finals so far, which is atrocious, obviously. The Celtics pushed it back up to 10, back to a 10-point lead at the 9-minute mark in the fourth quarter, but the Celtics are able to just push the lead out and hang onto it. Now, the Celtics shot 57% in the first half. They were 27 for 47 shooting. The Warriors switched to a zone defense at one point, but still couldn't slow down the Celtics' offense. The Warriors still managed to outscore the Celtics in the third quarter, 33-25, and have outscored the Celtics 106-63 in third quarters during the series through 3. The Warriors, on the other hand, have been completely wiped out in fourth quarters, as they were in Game 3. They were outscored 23-11 and have been outgained 87-45 in fourth quarters in this series. As a matter of fact, in the playoffs, through Game 3, the Warriors had played 76 quarters of basketball. The 3 fourth quarters against the Celtics have been the first, tied for second, and tied for 6th as far as the lowest scoring quarters in their 76 played through that point. Now, the Warriors will have to keep an eye on Steph Curry. He injured his leg around the 4-minute mark. With 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, there's a mad scramble where himself, Draymond Green, who ended up falling out of the game on that play, and a couple Celtics ended up on the floor, and Curry's leg was kind of twisted up under him. He was pulled from the game at the 2-minute mark, down a dozen. Kerr explained that he did not pull Curry due to his leg and him kind of limping around for a couple minutes, but because the game was out of reach with 2 minutes left, I think that's a little arguable. Usually the Warriors kind of push to try and keep the pressure on and see if they can kind of grab the game at the end, but he did pull Curry down a dozen with 2 minutes left, and that leg is going to be in question. It sounds like a serious injury, and he will be questionable, I imagine, moving forward. I fully expect him to play in Game 4, but again, only one night off here between Games 3 and 4. Now, the Celtics absolutely crushed the boards. The discrepancy wasn't huge. They won by a edge of, it was a 47-32 difference on the boards and a 15-6 difference on the offensive line. So they crushed them on the offensive boards. They also had 12 turnovers to the Warriors 16. Now that's a big difference because I believe the Celtics are undefeated if they have fewer than 16 turnovers. So they kept it to a dozen in Game 3. The shooting numbers were about the same. Both teams shot 37% from 3, with Celtics knocking down just a couple more 3-point attempts. And the Celtics shot 48% from the field, while the Warriors shot 46%. Jason Tatum, again, his shoulder still seemed to bother him. He shot just under 40% from the field, but still finished with 26 points. He was 9 for 23, 3 for 9 from the 3-point line, added in 9 assists and 6 rebounds. We're seeing those assist numbers go up again like they did in Game 1, so he's still able to distribute and create plays even if he's struggling to shoot a little bit. Al Horford, a lot more prevalent, 11 points for him, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Of course, Jaylen Brown exploded, and we usually know if it's going to be a good Jaylen Brown night if he really pops off in the first quarter. He finished with 27 points, 56% shooting, 4 of 8 from 3, 9 rebounds and 5 assists as well for him. Marcus Smart slowly chipped in 24 points. It sure didn't seem like that. He had 17 shot attempts, which is second only to Tatum, but finished with 24 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He also had a handful of turnovers, but he still finished with a positive plus-minus, so that's solid. Grant Williams was more productive in this game. He finished with 10 points. And Robert Williams was a monster. 8 points, 10 rebounds, 4 blocks, 3 steals, and he logged almost 26 minutes on the court. And he was just a monster for this team. Derek White arguably had an off night. 3 for 9 shooting, 0 for 3 from 3, only 7 points. But when everyone else is being productive, you can afford to have an off night from one of your role guys, and he's been productive defensively as well. Now the Warriors, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson both got going. So Klay finished with 31 points, shooting 54% from the field, and going 6 for 11 from 3, while Thompson had 25 points. He was 7 for 17 from the field, 5 for 13 from 3, so it took him a second to get going, and then he was able to knock down some shots. Wiggins had 18 as well. He's sometimes hit or miss. It wasn't a great night for him. 43% from the field, 1 for 6 from 3. And you have to be concerned when you get some of your shooters going and you still lose. Poole was the only other one in double digits with 10, 4 for 8 from the field. So you have to be concerned with Steph Curry's leg and if they're going to be able to even win another game or two in this series. The Celtics are looking to really cruise here in the finals. But the final for Game 3 was 116-100. The Celtics holding off a third quarter rally again from the Warriors and just pushing the lead out. Steph Curry still looks like the best scorer, best shooter in the series. Jason Tatum, if his shoulder was right, which it really doesn't look like it, perhaps he'd really elevate to the next level like it looked like he might through the first couple rounds in big games against, of course, the Nets and against Giannis and the Bucks in the second round, and that tough defensive battle against the Heat in round 3, the Eastern Conference Finals. But struggling to shoot, and you got to think it's something more serious with that shoulder than just a strain or a sprain. So Game 4 has just wrapped up, and we are all locked up now. 107-97 was the final. Warriors able to grab a game in Boston. There was a difference in the starting lineup. Otto Porter started in place of Kevon Looney. A little switch up there for the Warriors, which didn't really pay off at all. Robert Williams was playing. His knee is always in question, and he's stated that he doesn't know until he goes through warm-ups whether he'll be good to go or not during the games. That's been a clip that's been going viral throughout the playoffs here. But the Warriors started 0 for 6 from 3 and proceeded to hit their next 5, I believe, or 5 of their next 6 3-point shots. And they quickly turned a 7-point deficit early in the quarter into an 8-0 run and took a 5-point lead halfway through the first quarter. The Celtics defense is physical and really pushing around the Warriors early until they started to get into a bit of a rhythm there. This was the first game in a while that Jason Tatum wasn't grabbing at his shoulder throughout a good chunk of the game, so it was good to see that he was kind of feeling relief in that area. Both him and Curry finished with 12 points at the end of the first quarter as they got started early, and it was a 28-27 lead as both teams kind of got fired up early in the game. The second quarter, we saw Pritchard hit the floor, although he wasn't very effective here. Poole was in for Steph Curry. He was more effective scoring the ball. He hit 8 straight for the Warriors at one point. Robert Williams was dominant throughout this entire game on both sides of the floor. He actually had some stellar passes on the offensive end, kicking the ball out to the corner a few times to set up open looks. And on the defensive side, he was a deterrent in the paint. He had a couple big blocks, and he was great on the boards as well. And just a great presence. He switched onto Steph Curry multiple times and was just a monster. The halftime score was 54-49, so a little bit more electric first and second quarter all together in this game, as we were looking towards kind of hitting the under, which I believe was 212. So we were still looking at hitting the under at this point, but a little bit higher scoring than a few of the games we've seen these two teams in. The rebounding stats were comparable. It was 25-24 edge for the Celtics, and it was 10 turnovers to 8 for the Celtics as well. And we know that the Celtics, of course, if they have fewer than 16, they are undefeated. Boston hit 8 3-pointers to Golden State 7, but had 10 fewer 3-point attempts. So they are actually 57% from 3 versus 29% from 3 for the Warriors. Now the Celtics had 1 fewer 2-point field goal made, but were shooting 46% from the field compared to 39% from the Warriors. So more attempts from 3 for the Warriors and more misses as well. Jason Tatum had 16 points on 6 of 14 shooting. It was 3 of 4 from 3 plus 7 boards and 3 assists. Brown had 12. White had 10 and was a little bit more involved in this game. Logged a lot more time. Robert Williams was 2 for 2 from the field for 5 points, but had 10 rebounds, 4 of them offensive to grab those additional possessions, 2 blocks and 2 assists, and again, just a dominant player on defense. Curry had 19. He was only 2 of 8 from 3, though, so that wasn't where a lot of his points were coming. Wiggins had 11 and 5 rebounds. Jordan Poole had 10, so that's what we were looking at there at the half. Third quarter again belonged to the Warriors, as did the entire second half, but it was a 30-24 edge for the Warriors in the third. Steph Curry was 4 for 5 from 3. He finished with 14 points in the quarter. And Marcus Smart had 9 to lead the Celtics. 13 players scored altogether in the third. It was a lot of lazy Celtics turnovers early that helped keep the Warriors involved. Curry did a great job hitting 2 3-pointers back-to-back and really should have had more free throws coming as he was really banged up on both of the hits. One of them, Tatum came behind and got some action hitting him in the back after the shot was released. Jaylen Brown was 4 for 4 in the quarter for 10 points. But again, it was just a more productive performance by the Warriors. Steve Kerr did a little bit different personnel changes as well in the fourth quarter. Played a little offense-defense. Left Draymond Green out for a section in the fourth quarter, and because he couldn't play Looney and Green together. So you have to leave him out for a stretch and put Poole in for more shooting. On his podcast after the game, Draymond Green stated that he didn't have to discuss the benching with Steve Kerr, and he certainly understood being left out of the lineup as he was struggling for a great chunk of the game, and he has been for the series. So he discussed that there was no bad blood there between himself and the coach. There was a point where Kerr intentionally called a timeout just to get Draymond out of the game and get Poole back in for more offensive firepower as well. So the balance will be something to watch going forward. Also, Robert Williams appears to have re-aggravated his knee in the fourth quarter as well, but hopefully he'll be ready to go for Game 5. Belicia was out there, and he did not log more than a few minutes. It was interesting to have him out in the fourth for a handful of time. He was in place of Klay out there with the starting lineup, which was surprising at the time, and when Klay Thompson was subbed back into the game, they actually when Curry was being brought back into the game, they actually subbed Klay Thompson out and left Belicia in the game for a few more minutes. So just an interesting substitution pattern there in the fourth quarter. We had some wild possessions to start as well. A no call on Belicia running down the court when he was getting swatted by Tatum. The ball actually went off of him, and they kept possession of it, even though when no foul was called and the ball went off of him, it should have went back to the Celtics. And instead, he inbounded the pass right to Jaylen Brown, and the Celtics ran down the court and got a bucket. We actually had back-to-back buckets for the Celtics to go up 5 points. We also had a possession by Jason Tatum that ended up in an air ball. So just a few weird sequences, but ultimately put the Celtics up by 5 points at the 7:30 mark. And the next 2 minutes, the Warriors spent time cutting that lead down and grabbing their first lead of the night. Now this is crazy. The final 5:15 of the game, the Warriors were able to outscore the Celtics 17-3. Now we've seen the Celtics offense completely go in a hole and die before, and this is one of those occasions that just happened to be at the very end of the fourth quarter of this game. It was a 17-3 run over the final 5:15 of the game, unfortunately, to put the Celtics away and win the game by 10. The Warriors shoot 50% from the field in the fourth and hold the Celtics to 33% shooting. They also out-rebound Boston 16-6. Overall, in the second half altogether, the Warriors outscore the Celtics by 15 points and out-rebound them 31-17. The plus-minus for each team is also basically a flip-flop. All the Warriors are in plus territory, other than Belicia, whose name I still will never say correctly. And the Celtics were all negative, other than Peyton Pritchard at +1. So all things considered, without Steph Curry, the Warriors would not have had a shot in this game. Thank goodness his leg and his ankle were feeling okay after Game 3. He finished with 43 points, hit 7 of his 14 threes. He also had 10 rebounds and 4 assists as well, and he was the key scorer down the stretch for the Warriors. Klay Thompson had 18, Wiggins had 17 points and 16 rebounds, which was a career high for him. And he was plus 20 for the game in the plus-minus column, second only to Kevon Looney at plus 21, with 6 points and 11 rebounds in his time on the floor. There were times he was kind of lost, though, when Robert Williams wasn't his foil on the other side for the Boston Celtics when he was off the court. Poole finished with 14 altogether, and Gary Payton he played less than 10 minutes and he basically disappeared. So I don't know how effective he's going to be moving forward. Bringing him back was supposed to be a big deal for the Warriors, and it really hasn't been as big of a deal as we as first thought. Otto Porter, who of course was in the starting lineup, played 14 and a half minutes and contributed almost nothing. I think he had a rebound, and he was 0 for 2 shooting, maybe an assist, but he was just empty stats, basically. Now, Jason Tatum, 23 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 blocks, but only finished +1 on the plus-minus. And that's because he had 6 turnovers and only shot 34% from the field. So he's just, I don't know if he's worn down. The defense was certainly more aggressive with him. He's got to figure out. I don't know if his shoulder did start to bother him later on, but he was part of the reason the offense just went in the hole. Obviously, there's a handful of other guys that can score. Brown, Smart. Brown did finish with 21 points, 6 rebounds. Smart had 18. Derek White had 16 and played 35 minutes after basically getting benched and only playing a handful of minutes in Game 3. But I don't know what happened at the end of this game that just evaporated the offense for the Celtics. Horford saw a little bit of more time as well. He had 8 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. And Pritchard and Grant basically aren't doing anything in this series so far. They played 10 and 12 minutes respectively. Robert Williams, again, the best plus-minus on the team with 7 points, 12 rebounds, 4 of which are offensive to give those additional shot attempts for the Celtics, 4 assists and 2 blocks. And it was just excellent other than the third quarter, which was a little bit of a jam up, and the second half really dissipated quickly for the Celtics. But first half he was excellent, and he still had his moments here and there in the second half. Now, there were no double-digit leads through the first 3.5 quarters, basically until the final, when it was a 10-point finish. So it was one of our closest games so far here in the finals. And Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green ties the trio of Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker with 19 final wins. That's tied with that trio for the most finals wins for a group in the past 50 years. That's a big milestone. So if they pick up even one more, they'll be the trio with the most finals wins in the past 50 years. Probably extends further back than that, if I have to imagine, depending on which trio you want to put together. And I think as of 2 seasons ago, after an off-season of mega trades and free agency movement, Steph Curry was officially the longest tenured player on his current team. And that will probably look to continue as some kind of record going forward. So that's obviously a great sign and a great pillar to see with him up there with Tim Duncan, the longtime Spur. He's currently averaging 34.3 points per game, shooting 50% from the field and 49% from 3 so far. And he's counting for almost half of all the starter points for the Golden State Warriors so far in the series. And they're doing absolutely everything to get him open. So it's possible that even if the Celtics manage to pull away the series, that he could be in line for the rare MVP, finals MVP, even if the Warriors do not win the series. The great example of this was in the third quarter when Gary Payton actually received the ball in the corner for an open 3 and decided not to take the shot. He waited for Curry to come up and grab the ball from him while Gary Payton stepped up and kind of impeded Grant Williams' movement as he was tailing Steph Curry, and that left Curry open for a 3 from the corner. So regardless of how the rest of this series goes, he is the best player on the court, and he is continuing to cement his legacy going forward. as one of the best players all time in the NBA. Not just a three-point shooter, but an elite scorer. And he could have as many rings as LeBron James should they win this series. Hustle released on Netflix last week. It's a cool project, co-produced by LeBron James, and it's featuring Adam Sandler with a ton of NBA guests. And I'm always down for a great basketball movie or basketball movie that has great authenticity or real, life characters, so we're not featuring fake basketball names. And Adam Sandler's love of basketball has been well documented, from requesting hoops be set up at his movie sets to pulling up at pickup games. Of course, he was in Uncut Gems as the drama, kind of darker side of things in the basketball world with Kevin Garnett. That was a great movie. And the betting aspect and kind of that side of the world. So this movie is, again, a drama, actually. His character's name is Stanley Sugarman. He's an international NBA scout who's promoted to an assistant coach, only to get kicked back off the bench and into the world of scouting, international scouting. That's the important part here, is he's traveling all over the world. And he's told that if he finds a top prospect to help bring the 76ers a championship, that he'll be allowed back into his assistant coaching position that he was just promoted to. It's really one more step than was needed for the plot to be given him an assistant coaching position and then take it away. It's a carrot that could have been handled dangling over him as just he was a scout and he'll be promoted if he continues to do an excellent job and find the next great prospect at the end of the current season that they're in during the movie. So I don't know why promoting him and then taking it away was necessarily a piece of the film. It's one piece that isn't really too realistic by NBA standards as far as I can tell. Anyways, Queen Latifah is his wife, Teresa, and Jordan Hull is their daughter, Alex. The trio seems to have great chemistry when they're on screen together, and the movie would be flat without it, so it's very important to the whole cohesiveness of the film. The conflict, besides him fighting to get back on the assistant coaching side of things and out of the international travel, is that he does want to be close to his family, and it's kind of putting a strain on their relationship. So though that isn't accentuated as much as it could be in the film, it is certainly mentioned several times that he does not want to be traveling on the road. So we get a very serious and dramatic tone and kind of this fighting comeback story for both himself and this international player he ends up working with. Not spoiling too much here. It's a great film. You should go and watch it if you haven't already. Try not to put in too much spoiler, but once you get into it, it'll kind of work out like you would expect for most sports films. There's not too many twists and turns in a lot of these kinds of movies. But you do have some of the dramatic tension. You do have kind of a villain in the movie. And you still have some of the more mature Adam Sandler humor that we're starting to see later on in his career here. The opening scene is hilarious. He's meeting with 7'3" Boban, who goes by a different name in the movie, but states that he's 22 years old and he can't prove his age because his birth certificate is burned up in a fire. And if he's over 22, he can't participate in the NBA draft. Yet he clearly looks much, much older and is lying about his age. As a matter of fact, his son walks in on the conversation, who looks like he's well over 6 feet tall and looks much older than the 10 years old that Boban states he is. It's a great comedic scene to open the movie. Boban, of course, appeared in John Wick 3 as his first acting gig. And there's another scene later on in the movie where Adam Sandler is on the bus and speaking into his phone as in Spanish translation, and certainly comes across how he speaks into it, but the meaning doesn't quite reflect what he's trying to say, and it's a funny scene. There's plenty of moments of hilarious, more mature Adam Sandler besides the fart jokes that we're familiar with from his more childlike juvenile movies. There's a cool montage of Sandler's character going to all kinds of different countries to scout different prospects at the beginning of the film that seems to ring pretty true to how it is for real-life international scouts. I recently read The International Basketball Association by Joel Gunnarsson, a book that details the expansion and explosion of international players in the NBA. and the time and resources it takes for scouts to travel and see potential prospects in person and evaluate them, and the hardship of the travel and staying away from your family for so long, and just the difficulties that it truly is to be an international scout, and still the struggle, even in all the travel, to get full evaluations of players as well. So just stretching people all the way to their end to be international scouts, and the difficulty that takes. And it really seems that even in the brief montage and the brief instances that it's measured, that at least it gives some brief, small insight to at least what it is to partially be an international scout to a lesser degree. It doesn't capture, I'm sure, all the sleepless nights and how difficult it can really be to speak with your family. But at least I think it gives kind of the sense of what it was like to be in that profession and how difficult that can be. The NBA players mostly play themselves in the film. Occasionally they do portray a different character just to kind of forward the progression of the film and use real life players as stand-in for actors, as opposed to using actors as stand-in for basketball players. So Anthony Edwards is playing a big rival in this movie, but he is not playing Anthony Edwards. He's playing a different prospect. He plays a solid part. He does a lot of trash talking in this film, which he does on the court as well, and he's fabulous. It'd be great to see him on screen more. He has great press conferences in real life, and his dog, Ant Jr., has a great Twitter as well, so it's great to see him in the film. But we do have Kyle Lowry in the film, a Philly native, of course, Mo Wagner, Chris Middleton, Aaron Gordon, Trae Young, Jordan Clarkson, Seth Curry, Luka Doncic. Dirk Nowitzki has an actual speaking part for a brief time. Kenny Smith has a role. We see Shaq, Ernie, and Charles. We have Jay Wright, actually. I think this was filmed prior to him retiring from Villanova, but he pops up. Famous Italian basketball coach Sergio Scarlio. Candace Parker's in it briefly. We do see former 76er Julius, Dr. J. Irving, Allen Iverson, current 76ers Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, Doc Rivers. So just a long list of players involved in this, with the NBA's blessing, of course. There's no Joel Embiid until a montage at the end of the movie. I believe it's actual game film, so he's not actually in the movie portraying a character or himself. So that's a little strange, but I kind of wonder if it's similar to the Space Jam 2, where you had a number of high-profile guys opting out of filming the movie to kind of focus on basketball. It's possible that Joel had the same kind of mindset. He's been very focused on becoming a better player since losing in the 2019 conference finals or second round, I believe, that Game 7 bounce in that Kawhi Leonard hit, that epic shot that removed them from the playoffs. So it's possible that he just turned down a role in this film, even though I'm sure he could have fit it in with a few minutes on his schedule. But it's possible he was offered with his teammates and just decided to turn it down. But overall, without ruining too much of the plot, Juancho Herrera-Gomez, who is a real-life NBA player, plays one of the main characters as the top prospect, hidden prospect that Adam Sandler ends up finding. He was drafted in 2016 and has played for 5 different teams in the NBA. He's currently with the Utah Jazz as a reserve. He's never had a big role in any of the teams, but he does a stellar job for the role and what is needed. So altogether, this is really a solid film. It clocks in right around 2 hours, and it's got a lot of different phases to it, and it's a little long in a few parts in the training montages and pieces like that. But overall, it's a solid sports film, certainly not flawless or perfect or anything like that. A lot of the characters don't really develop throughout the movie. Adam Sandler sort of works forward, and you'll see if you haven't already, kind of progresses, as does Bo, who was Hernagonez's character. So those two, the main characters, certainly develop. You don't see a whole lot of his family, Bo's family. You certainly see their background, but not a whole lot of development there, even though they aren't core pieces of the story. And, you see the relationship with his wife and different pieces there, but we don't always get fully rounded characters in him and some of the other people he's talking to and kind of the peripheral characters. Just kind of the made to focused pieces of the movie, which is kind of fine. And his daughter actually has more of a progression than most of the other characters. But it's a solid watch and possibly a rewatch just because we have real NBA people involved. Adam Sandler is enjoyable. There's some real kind of connections, it seems like, on screen. It's not always flat and boring like some sports movies or concept movies can be, when they're kind of built more around the idea of basketball or sports, but they don't fully round out the characters. So there are some human kind of connections here and chemistry on the set with the actual people that kind of reflects onto the screen. So it's not necessarily an A+ script, but that's very few and far between with sports movies anyway. So this is a solid watch, runs a little bit long. We have some rocky montage type scenes that aren't necessarily needed, but this is a closer product to some glimpses you'd get in the NBA, I think, from a glorified movie perspective, and a solid watch with Adam Sandler, a handful of NBA players, both new and old, and it's a solid watch. So this is Hustle on Netflix right now. Check it out.
All my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, 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 all my blessings. I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one. I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a